Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Gridiron 2022. Dr. Ron Poniewasz, joined by Professor Larry Kelly. We are the award-winning Gridiron 22 staff, and Larry Kelly is a member of the Luxembourg, Garbett, Kelly & George law firm. He's the varsity baseball coach at Shenango. Larry Kelly, sir, welcome aboard, and thank you for joining us.
Welcome aboard. Thank you so much for having me. I got Union colors on today. I got my blue on, but actually Mikey Gunn, the father, dropped off a Union football shirt at my office, and son of a gun, I left it as I was walking out the door. I was going to wear it tonight. But I'm so proud of those guys, man. 25 brothers, maybe 25 on the roster. I'm not so sure they had 25, but a band of brothers, a band of warriors, winning the Whippeal Championship, taking it to the championship game. There's no loser in that game, Ronnie. Like I said, I've been on both sides of that. I've been a winner in a state championship game, and I've been a loser in a state championship game. And when you look at it in retrospect, when you look at it through the rear view mirror, man, it's a great season. It's a heck of a run. There's only 2 teams left, and you were one of them. And, even though you didn't come out on top the day of the game, it really doesn't take anything away from the season you had. You had a championship season, and you should be proud of those efforts and proud of those kids. And I know the community is that Union Scotty community is a tight-knit community. The people that have been living in that community have lived there pretty much all their lives. And it brings a smile to my face when I think about all they accomplished.
Yeah, absolutely. Larry, let's start way back when in August. And this team was play Mohawk right out of the chute. That game got canceled. I remember talking to Kim Needballer that night, and he says, we don't have a game. We're trying to reach out to somebody. It's game week. We're like 4 days away from finding a game. We just can't find a game. So we're going to accept it. We're going to work on ourselves and be ready. And then, I remember scrolling through Twitter that night, and I saw Canton had an opening, and I was going to call him, and I thought, and there's a reason I'm telling you this story. So they end up playing Canton, a team that had been to the state semifinals 3 years in a row, make it 4 this year. And after the game, I was standing on the outside of the locker room because he had the door shut. And I remember him preaching that we do not take moral victories. We do not accept moral victories. Either win or you lose. We came up on the short end of the stick. There are no moral victories. But I tell you what, those kids came together. That must have struck a chord with those guys, because from that point on, that was a different football team. We talked about it last week on how they are much different than they were from the Southside Beaver loss, their last loss. And they just came together all throughout the season and really fed off of that, Larry. I don't know what it was. What do you think gelled so much, or what they learned from that Canton game that they were able to?
I think it was a good football team, and they were good that game. I mean, this Canton team is, like you said, they've been to the state semifinals 4 years in a row. They had Steelton-Highspire on the ropes and kind of lost it in the last possession of the game. I mean, they could have been the ones in the championship game. I'd have to think about that. There are no moral victories. When you make it to the state championship game and you lose, I think that's a moral victory. Listen, to get there, the journey, the gauntlet they had to go through, man, it hurts. I've been there, Ronnie. I've been there twice, losing in the state championship game, once in baseball, once in hoops. It hurts. But when you look at it in retrospect and you think about all that you've accomplished and what it took to get there, and truth be told, a few breaks have to go your way. It just does. When you look back on a championship season or a trip to the championship game, when you look back on the season, you'll say, this play went our way, that call went our way. So a lot of things have to go right for you to get there. And I'm not big on moral victories either. In most winning coaches and championship teams aren't. But the fact that they lost in the state championship game, in Larry Kelly's view, does not diminish what they accomplished. It just doesn't. It just doesn't. And I think if you look at it that way, then you're missing the big picture. You know, this team had a tremendous year, and when they look back on it 5 years from now, it's gonna be memories that brings back not only great memories but a smile to their face. So, you know, you play good competition in the first game and lose, you learn a little bit about yourself. Certainly, I always say I always learn a little bit more in defeat than I did in victory. I learn a little bit more about myself and my team when we lose, because you look at it more closely. You look at it with more introspection. And I'm sure that's what Union, the boys did, and Coach Nabala did after that first game. They had a great year, man. It just brings a smile to my face. They had a great
year. Absolutely. And I really liked Coach Kim Needballa's comments to the news after the game. You know, he had mentioned, going in that somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. They didn't want to be the team that came up on the losing end, but that's where we are. In terms of sports, there's no ties. Somebody has to win and somebody has to lose, and they gave it their all, and they have nothing to be ashamed about. And and that's probably the best thing, is to be able to walk off the field. If you don't have the most amount of points in the game, if you come up on the losing end, if you can say to yourself, do we have any regrets? Did we leave anything out there? And they didn't. They gave everything they had, every ounce of it, and that's every game. But last Thursday, they have no regret. I think it softens the blow.
The victory's in the effort, Ronnie. It is. What the effort, not only the effort on Thursday afternoon, but the effort that it took all season to get there. That's where the victory's at. At the end of the day, what have you learned about yourself? What character traits have you developed? Have you learned to be mentally tough? Have you learned to be laser focused? These are learned behaviors. And I'm sure that these Union young men who played on that football team are better because of that experience that they had this past year, and better young men because of that journey. And they'll carry that forward, not only next season for those who are coming back, but into the next stage of their life. As I always say, a high school coach is the bridge between adolescence and adulthood. And the lessons that you learn while traveling that bridge are lessons that last a lifetime. So, hey, they are the athletes of the week, baby, and they deserve it. And I applaud them. And I listen, when they have their championship banquet because they won the Whitfield championship, I may go because, man, it's going to be a celebration, and they deserve it. And Coach, I'm going to tell you now, Coach Nibala, you want me to come and give a little speech here and fire those guys up? I'm available for you, my friend. I am available for you. So,
what is the word that the visa, is that the word?
It's VISTA: vision, integrity, selflessness, tenacity, and ability. If you have that, you'll always be successful.
Just a fair warning to Coach Needball. It takes about 3.5 to get through. So if you can sit through that, you're good to go.
Nobody's ever complained when I was done. I know that.
Yeah, Larry, I'm going to tie this all together. It might. I'm going to try to get it to go through as quick as possible. And I know you've watched the movie Moneyball, and trust me, I believe there's a tie-in, because I remember sitting there over the weekend thinking about it, and this really applies. Now, when you said that there is a moral victory for Union, so it kind of lessens my my stance on this in terms of, I kind of thought we could play along and you'd be on the other side of the fence, and this really hurts. But there's probably kids out there, players, maybe even coaches, that are crushed by the defeat. The last 15 or 20 minutes of the movie, you'll know where I'm talking about, Larry, where Billy Bean comes back from his trip to Boston, where if you remember that part.
Oh, I watched the movie probably 20 times, yeah. Ronnie. One of my favorites.
I've probably watched it 200. I love that movie. some quotes, and there's 5 of them. They're all one sentence just about. Billy Beane says, "I really wanted to win here. I really did." And his assistant, Peter Brand, says, "I think you won pretty big, Billy." And Billy Beane says, "Pete, we lost. We lost." And Peter Brand says, "It's only been a few days. Give yourself some time to get over it." Billy Beane says, "Man, I don't get over these things ever." And see, and where that ties in is Coach Needball, the program, they won. They won pretty big. You know, Cinderella, 1959, last WPIL championship. It was shared. 1973, last trip to the semifinals, I believe it was, or I can't remember what all the numbers were. There was 73, 79. You know, all this sort of stuff. They won pretty big this year. It's going to take them some time to realize that. There has to be something that gets them to settle in and accept that, or to realize it. And from the movie, a heavy set Jeremy Brown that was 60 feet over the fence, and he didn't even realize it. You know, there has to be something, a moment that these kids can say, "We won pretty big this year."
Listen, I think I told you this. When we lost the state championship game in baseball, it took me a year to watch the replay of it. A year.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, when I watched it a year later, a lot of what I saw brought a smile to my face. I saw my kids battle. They didn't give up, man. They come within a run of coming back. I saw the type of things, effort and mental toughness and laser focus that we talked about all year. And when I saw them exhibited in the championship game, it brought a smile to my face, even though we lost. And when I saw them stand there like men and collect their second place medal, it brought a smile to my face, because that's character. So, you know, there's a lot that you can smile about, not immediately after the game, but when you look back in retrospect, there's a lot that brings some joy and satisfaction to you as a coach and as a player. And it's not the final result, it's the journey. The journey that it took them to get there is something they'll always remember. And, you know, it's hard when it happens, brother. Believe me, I've lived it. But when you do look back after time passes, coaching the ball, and some of these kids, when they watch that film, they're going to see some things that bring a smile to their face.
Yeah. Last week, we talked about it as far as how this helps them for next year, getting extra practices, being ahead of other schools. Let's go the other way, Larry. The off season, you know, other schools like a Southside, a Rochester, Laurel, other schools, you know, they've been in the off season and they've had their time away, and they're probably just now starting to get back into the weight room and start their winter training. So, Larry, I'll ask you, you know, it's the off season. When do you get back? Do you push it back to maybe first part of January, or do you just try and make up for lost time?
No, I'm sure, you know, once January rolls around, those guys will be back in the weight room. A lot of these young men play basketball also, but you got to give them a little time off. You got to give them time to breathe. They had a long season, baby. They've been pounding since the middle of July, and here we are. You know, we're in December, the middle of December. So I'm sure they'll have a month or two off. Maybe they'll start, you know, getting back into the weight room January, February. But it's a lot easier to get back into the weight room when you're the WPIAL champ. Trust me, it's a lot. Nothing succeeds like success. And it's a lot easier to get in the weight room when you won a WPIAL championship than it is if your team went 2-8. It's a lot more difficult to get in that weight room when you haven't had success in the previous year.
Yeah. Okay, Larry, take a trip back in time with me, if you would. It's about 2 or 3 years ago, somewhere around there, roughly. You'll remember the Union was down in numbers, but what else is new? You know, Union's always been down in numbers. And there was a part somewhere in the middle of the year where they were so low in numbers that, are we going to see them cancel the rest of the season? Is there going to be a co-op? They had a midweek board meeting, what have you, where they addressed it. And they figured, all right, let's play out the rest of the season. Then we'll address it. We'll try to drum up more interest if you remember all that stuff. And I always say this about any program: the more success you have, it's going to be easier to get those numbers up. Well, here you go. Okay, you've got a WPIAL championship and a state runner-up. You've done everything you can do outside of winning a state title. So if the numbers don't improve for next year or a couple, do you agree that the numbers are just going to be what they are, and it's going to be mid to upper 20s? Granted, they were what they were. The success wasn't there, but it was certainly there this year. So you have to think the numbers, if they're ever going to go up right now.
Ronnie, nothing succeeds like success. The numbers will go up because kids get excited. And when they get excited about playing, and they see that the varsity's having tremendous success, they want to be part of that. So I'd be surprised if those numbers do not go up. I would be really surprised.
Mm-hmm. And next year, Larry, when the schedule's coming, Union's going to be in a weird spot. They are, because years past, Union used to grab their pen and circle games. Those were their and they're still going to do that with Rochester. They'll do it with Southside. They'll do it with Laurel. But guess what? They are no longer the hunted. They're going to be the hunted. People are going to start circling games. Where do we play Union at? When do we play Union? So they're going to be in a different position next year, Larry.
Absolutely. And they have a bunch of those young men coming back who are playmakers. And I'd be surprised come next year when the Post-Gazette puts out their preseason top four, that Union isn't one of the top four in the Post-Gazette preseason poll. But you got to do it on a field, Ronnie. You've got to do it on a field. Every year the ball goes up again, and you better be ready to compete. And I'm sure they will, because they have some studs coming back. And, they know what it takes now. They know what the formula is to get to championship games. And probably the toughest thing to do is repeat, however. It really is difficult, but I'm certain they'll be up for the task.
Okay, athlete of the week is the Union High football team. And watch me, Larry. Standing ovation. Right
Absolutely. There. Absolutely, Ronnie. Absolutely. They deserve it, man. It brought a smile to my face. I listened to that game at work. I kept running in and out of my office. My secretary, Cheryl, had it we were listening to it on the computer, and she was giving me updates. And I was pulling hard for those young men. And but listen, they're champions in my eyes. The fact that the final score at Cumberland Valley is never going to change my view of the Union 2022 football team.
Absolutely. Congratulations, Union, to a fantastic season. 12-4 overall, WPIAL championship, second in the program's history, first outright, and the first trip to the state championship game. Nothing at all to be ashamed of. You gave it your all for games, battled hard, and you have nothing to be ashamed of.
There's one thing I learned growing up around here. People should look out for each other, be friends and neighbors that you can count on. So it bothers me when people who are hurt in automobile accidents get bullied by the insurance company. I don't let bullies run over my clients. I do what I was taught growing up. Step up, stand up, and speak up for those who can't. I'm Larry Kelly, and I'm a Newcastle guy.
Back with you here on Gridiron, and we're going to talk a little bit about the championship recap, the game itself. When Union came up on the short end of a 22-8 loss to Steelton-Highspire. And, Larry, we had talked in between, off air, how they can't do certain things like penalties and turnover. One of the things that, I think we both glossed over, Union had a touchdown called, I believe it was, might have been on and then turned the ball over bounds on fourth down. And just one of those things that you got to think maybe the game goes a little bit differently for them if they take that lead, even if it was just a 6-0 lead at the time.
Yeah, I mean, they had a holding penalty, which called back the first touchdown. And, it's so important, I think, to get ahead in championship games because it really puts the pressure on the other team. And, you can't have penalties in the red zone. You just can't. It's especially in high school football where, if you get backed up 10 or 15 yards, it's very difficult on a first and goal from the 5 to then be pushed back to the 15 or the 20 and be able to score a touchdown. So, we talked about that. You can't make those mistakes. And unfortunately, Union had a couple of those. They had a holding penalty that called back the first touchdown. Steelton goes up 7-0. Union then scores, converts the 2-point conversion to go ahead 8-7, and that gets called back on a procedure penalty. So you can't have those penalties in the red zone and on scoring plays. And unfortunately, that happened to them. And, we talked about it last week. They had a lot of penalty yards last week. And unfortunately, in this game, they had, again, 10 penalties for 71 yards. And that holding penalty and that procedure penalty took points off the board. And you certainly never want to do that.
Right.
Because this game statistically was a draw.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Union trailed 7-0 at the half and got it within 7-6. A failed 2-point conversion there in the third quarter, late stages of the third quarter. 21 seconds left. Raylan scores a lone touchdown on a 1-yard run. Steelton-Highspire taking a late in the third quarter. Very Union safety 47 seconds fourth quarter, and you have 13-8. It's right there for the right position. If you take that in, on ahead with a quarter.
Yeah, there was a couple really big momentum plays in that game. With the score 7-0 in the end of the second half, Union threw an interception again in the red zone. I believe it was picked off in the end zone right at the end of the half. So instead of scoring a touchdown and going into the half either tied, they wouldn't have been tied. They'd either been up by a point or down by a point. They're down 7-0, and all the momentum is with Steelton. There are certain plays in a game that oftentimes swing the momentum, and it swings the momentum like a sledgehammer. And that was one of them. An interception right at it was in the last minute, I believe, of the second quarter. A big play that really, really, could have made a difference. In what you're talking about, also, a big play that goes the other way that could have made a difference in the game. And but again, statistically, this game was a draw. Union ran the ball for 102 yards. Steelton ran it for 111. Again, controlling the line of scrimmage. Union didn't control the line of scrimmage, but neither did Steelton. First down, 16-11. There was a little bit of an edge for Steelton, but not much. Total yards, 250 to 172. Again, not a big disparity. Union held its own. This Steelton team was scoring 40, 50 points a game, right? And Union holds them to 22, half of their scoring average. So, again, if you look at the game from a statistical standpoint, it's pretty much a draw. It's an even game. But there are 2 or 3 plays, 2 or 3 penalties that kind of changed the momentum and swung it in Steelton's favor. And unfortunately for Union, they were on the wrong side of those plays, and that's kind of what determined the game here.
With 5,
and that's where I lost you.
Yeah, 20-8. Is that? Do you feel that that's where the clock struck me?
Yeah, pretty much. There wasn't much time left in the game. At that point, it was clear that this was going to be a low-scoring game. After the first half, again, neither team dominating the line of scrimmage. Both teams were playing good defense. It was going to be a low-scoring game, and that last score kind of Union had to play out of character at that point. They had to become a passing team, and that's not necessarily who they are. And yeah, I mean, that was it. Union had their chances, as I said. Had they scored, and not had the score called back because of the holding penalty, had they scored the 2-point conversion and not had that play called back, changes the complexion of this football game.
Absolutely. And like we've talked about, nothing to be ashamed of. They battled 4 quarters. They didn't get run off the field. We're going to look back and look at it. How competitive was it? Unless you covered it or invested in the team in any way, maybe you don't kind of wonder, was it Steelton-Highspire? But that wasn't the case. Union was right there fourth quarter.
Oh, actually, Ronnie, I was wrong. Had Union scored right at the end of the half, they were going to take the lead.
Right.
Because the score was 7-6 at the time. I was thinking it was 7-0. So, I mean, that is huge. That interception, which I believe occurred in the end zone right at the end of the half, is a huge momentum swing. And had Union scored, there and went into the half leading, changes the complexion of the game. Everything changes at that point.
Yeah, well, it was 7-0 at the half. Union's touchdown with 2:21 left, third quarter. So.
Oh, okay. Then I was right. All right. I'm looking at the line score here. The line score had it wrong then, because the line score had Union scoring at the end of the half. I thought that was right. Yeah. Okay. But still, a big play. You know what I'm talking about. It's a big play. And had they scored at that point, swings the momentum.
And they do go for 2 all the time. Who knows? Maybe they stick the 2-pointer in the end zone, and they do, as you mentioned, take a half.
They go 8-7, right? Take the lead at the half, because that interception had occurred right at the end of the half. But again, the statistical draw. I mean, these teams were evenly matched, and when you have evenly matched teams, there will be one or two plays, 1 or 2 penalties that sometimes make the difference. And in looking at it here in retrospect, that's kind of what made the difference in this game.
Sure. All right, Larry, anything you want to say about the championship game before we get into some farewells for Gridiron 22 before we have our random topic at the end of this?
Only that Union High School is a championship football team. Winning the Whippeal Championship is a big deal. It's a big deal. And they beat Bishop Cannabin, one of these private schools, to get players from various school districts. That is a feather in your cap. That deserves a championship ring. That deserves a championship banquet. And I always say, winning the Whippeal around here is a big deal. Winning the state is just icing on the cake. It really is. And, there'll be a championship cake here in a few weeks for the Union Scotties, and it's well-deserved.
Yeah, a lot of times when I talk to coaches, doesn't matter what sport it is, you'll hear them about quote unquote being on the map. We're now on the map or anything like that. I don't think Union just on the map. I think this is a flag plant. They've planted their flag firmly on the state of Pennsylvania, saying we're on the map now.
Well, I mean, and they're going to be back on the map next year because, as I said, many of these young men who had outstanding seasons are coming back. And, I got a saying, show me your leaders and I'll show you your team. And, a couple of these leaders, Mike Gunn, Braylon Thomas, they're coming back. And, that's going to be quite a team next year led by those 2 young men.
Right. First off, I'd like to thank a lot of people here, everybody. I'd like to thank the law firm of George for sponsoring it. Without their sponsor, we would not be on here. And our high school without the sponsor. And I'd like to thank here football, Gridiron. Very appreciate the Kelly time and his dedication. Next, I would thank coaches head coaches, assistant coaches, whatever. They put up with a lot. We demand a lot of their time and attention. You know, we're constantly calling out to them, wanting a little bit of their time, things like that. So yeah, that's very, and it means a lot to me. And the student athlete coach, we're out to student views, stories, things like that. That helps the county a lot better. Thanks to student athletes as well. Fans, what would sport be? You know, thank you for coming out to root on your team, your family members, neighbors, whatever the case may be. Larry, and I regret that this long to publicly James Dawes, what in the playoffs. Their Union play Laurel on Twitter. When did this series start? Things like that. I had a list of score by score, and he's helped me multiple weeks in the playoffs with different questions that I've had. So James Dotson, kudos to you for how you've helped. Trust me, it's well appreciated. Our whole staff, thank you for your knowledge and help to us. And certainly, our newsroom editor here at Newcastle News, he edits our stuff, gets through a lot of long video. That it's on there with Larry. Certainly thank Pete Siri for all he does for us and getting us out there to the viewing public. Thank you for everybody and watching us. Anything else, Larry, you'd like to say?
Well, just Ronnie, at LGKG, you know, this is to give back to a community that has been really, really good to Larry Kelly and my law firm. So, you know, we're glad to be able to sponsor this and bring this to the young men and women who throughout the basketball and football season get a chance to watch it and recap all of their success. So we're happy to do it, and God willing, we'll be able to do it for several years moving forward.
And I know people watch it because when I go to games, I have people talking about it. They'll ask me stuff, and I get emails periodically too, and that's great. We appreciate all the interest both at games and emails, and you know it's great interacting with fans, and we appreciate that. And we're just happy to be able to bring added coverage to everybody. So Larry, I thank you. And we have one more segment. We'll close it up here after that. Stay tuned right here. Yeah, what a huge help James was. Just
Jimmy Dodson is he's great. Jimmy Dodson is great. He really is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ronnie, for some reason, your feed today your Wi-Fi is not real good because you keep fading out. I keep losing your picture. I don't know why. You know, the Wi-Fi on your end isn't maybe up to speed today.
Yeah, there's times when I'm looking at the screen and it's a big letter P.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing.
Okay. And there's also times when I'm talking, it's almost like there's an echo, like I'm in a cave, and I try to slow myself down thinking maybe it'll stop, but it doesn't stop. And I'm talking in a cave, it sounds like.
I don't know what's going on or why. Yeah.
So
was I right that interception occurred right at the end of the half? Yeah, that was it. 106 left in the half. Score was 7-0. Right. And it was intercepted in the end zone. Yeah. Because I remember hearing that and seeing it. So.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we are good. I'm ready whenever you are.
Yeah. Hold on one second here. Just double checking something. Okay, brother, let's do it.
All right. Coming down in 3, 2, and 1. Okay, we're back with you here for one final time on Gridiron 2022, and we have a rather upsetting, disturbing topic to talk about, and it's social media related. After the championship games were completed last weekend, things started to be posted online and circulating in that regard. And Southern Columbia won another state championship. That's now 8 in a row, I believe it is, for Southern Columbia. They just run roughshod over teams at the AA level, and for whatever reason, I don't understand that they don't jump up in classification. But that's another topic for another time. A couple of their student athletes were videotaped on TikTok, and they were singing a song, I believe it was, or having some sort of dialogue, and there were racial comments toward the end of their video. And Larry, I know a couple years ago when I think it was a high school basketball coach was upset at officiating, and he took to Twitter, and I think he got fired. And I remember we discussed it, and I mentioned what I always do: social media is the devil's playground, and you stood up for Twitter and other social media platforms by saying you give inspirational messages or whatever on Twitter daily. But for every Larry Kelly that's out there that does good on Twitter, they're fools and idiots like there are at Southern Columbia. And I believe it was, they beat Newman Goretti. So the good that's out there that Larry Kelly does is far outnumbered by the trash that's out there by Southern Columbia and Bell Vernon. So Larry, first off, before we talk about punishment or how you would handle things, just your thoughts on what's been on Twitter.
I saw it. I know the TikTok that you're speaking of, and it was a reference to the team from Westinghouse by the Southern Columbia team. Ronnie, it's disappointing to me. It is so disappointing that this stuff still goes on in 2022. You know, one of the things about growing up in Newcastle is that the neighborhood that I grew up in was ethnically diverse, racially diverse, religiously diverse. And because of that diversity, you know, you learn to respect everybody. And, you know, it was a beautiful community. And when I hear things that were purportedly said by the team from Southern Columbia, it disappoints me tremendously. It actually makes me sick. And that's where I stand on that. It's just so disappointing.
Yeah, I echo your sentiments 100%. So Larry, being that you're a varsity baseball coach at Shenango, former 9th grade basketball coach at Newcastle, if you were in a position where something like this happened on your watch, what would your punishment be? Because I read a statement, the gist of a statement from Southern Columbia with their punishment. So I'd like to hear your punishment, how you would handle it. Then I will give my version, and then what actually happened.
Well, I think what I would do, certainly if I became aware of the comments that were made, you have to report it to the school. And the punishment belongs to the school. The principal, the superintendent would have to take steps to administer whatever punishment they deemed was appropriate. But I'm here to tell you that I'm not certain that if a student on my team said purportedly what these young men said, that they could remain a member of my team. And I'm not a guy that gives the death penalty to student athletes, young high school kids, because, you know, they make mistakes. They do things that are not appropriate. They do. And I always like to give them the benefit of the doubt at least one time. But there are certain things that, in my view, that are beyond the pale and are totally unacceptable for a program. And if what I heard was true, and actually was said by those young men, then those young men on Larry Kelly's team would be removed from the team.
As I almost knock over the tripod toward the end of your discussion, Larry, if it's me, what I'm doing as a coach, what have you, I'm meeting with administration and I'm telling them, okay, anybody that's on that video that is a freshman, sophomore, or junior, They do not get a varsity letter. They do not get a championship ring, and they are banned from playing for my varsity sport the rest of their time at the school, or the rest of my time as coach, in case they decide to dismiss me. If they are a senior, they do not get a championship ring. They do not get a varsity letter. And I'm finding out if they have college interests, maybe a college coach has looked at them and is interested in them, or maybe they plan on attending college just as a student. And I'm calling that university and I'm telling them, my name is Ron Poniewasz, and you're interested in so-and-so as a player, or so-and-so as a student. This, after a championship game, this is the type of person that this individual is. I'm letting you know so you can make your own decision. If you decide to welcome them into your university, that's on you. But I think it's your right to know the type of character that this kid has.
Well, again, you got to remember we're dealing with high school students. And just looking back at my years in high school, I did some things that I'm not proud of. Some stupid things, some silly things I did. But there are certain things that are beyond the pale. And, the punishment ultimately would be up to the school district as to what they think was appropriate, because this is a serious matter. As I told you, I would remove these young men from the team. Now, at the appropriate time, and if they showed appropriate contrition, I would consider letting them back on. But they would have to prove to me and their teammates that, they really are contrite and realize the errors of their ways.
One thing that my dad preaches a lot was PIAA or what have you regarding sports, and people will give apologies. How do you won't do stupid bleep? That's how you avoid giving an apology. So those kids don't do stupid bleep, and you won't be in this position.
Ronnie, but we're talking about high school kids. We're not talking about professional athletes. We're not talking about even college athletes who are oftentimes grown men. But again, there are certain things that are beyond the pale. Mm-hmm. And what I heard, if it was true, and what I saw, because it was all over social media, made me cringe when I heard it. And in my view, it was beyond the pale.
And so, and to stretch it just a little bit further, is this seems on the surface as a right and wrong thing. So when do you learn right from wrong? You should know right from wrong before you get into high school, whether you're a senior or a freshman. So that's where this is coming from. Know right from wrong. This is an exercise in right from wrong, and that's why you shouldn't have to let it come to this. You should already know that that's unacceptable.
I'd like to say that during my high school years, I didn't do some things that were silly and stupid, but I can't say that. And I thought I was a pretty good student and a pretty good high school kid. We're dealing with high school kids. I agree with you in what they did was beyond the pale. It was totally out of bounds here, but we are dealing with high school kids. And I'm not one to advocate the death penalty, so to speak, for a high school student. Not initially. And I've been coaching for 20 years. However, again, in this situation, before you would be allowed to rejoin your team, you better show proper contrition, and you better mean it, and you better understand, the errors of your ways, and maybe you need some sensitivity training, and I don't know, but it troubled me greatly when I heard that. It really did.
Yeah, same here. And so now, prior to us going on, when I was speaking with Pete Sirianni, he found a statement online from Southern Columbia, and it was pretty lengthy. So the discipline that they are taking on the student athletes is, for 1 calendar year, you are banned from any extracurricular activities at the school for 1 calendar year, which means sports, probably the newspaper staff or prom committee or anything extracurricular, one calendar year. So I will ask you, Larry, is it too lenient, too harsh?
I don't know what the age of these young men were, but if you have a junior, that means his senior year, he's not able to participate in any athletics, in any extracurricular activities. It sounds to me appropriate. It does. It does. That's a statement. You're making a statement, and I believe it's appropriate.
Okay. All right. I tend to agree. Although, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of football, if you have time available to the program, you're freshman, sophomore, or junior, you're not permitted back on the team at all the rest of your high school career. You're not getting a varsity letter. You're not getting a championship ring. I'm a lot more strict on it, obviously from the sounds of it, than what Larry is. But that is what Southern Columbia did. Now, we haven't heard anything from Bell Vernon. How Bell Vernon handles it, maybe they take a page out of Southern Columbia's book and adds to it a little bit, or later. But really, if they make it of a suspension, expect Bell Vernon to maybe escalate things. Maybe they'll take it to another level in terms of their punishment.
Again, it seems appropriate what Southern Columbia did. If you're a junior going into your senior year, that penalty is going to hurt. They're making a statement. We are dealing with high school kids, and everybody makes mistakes in life, Ronnie. The key is don't make the same mistakes twice. Hopefully they learn from it. Hopefully they're contrite and they realize the errors of their ways. And, I'm sure that the school board was involved in this decision, and I'm sure there was a lot of discussion. And I'm sure the discussion as to what the appropriate discipline and punishment would be reached each end of the spectrum, from what you were talking about to maybe doing nothing at all. But I think Southern Columbia got it right.
Okay, the fact that we are in the calendar year of 2022, seeing this stuff out there and actually talking about stuff like this is very troubling, and it shows you where we are as a society. I don't know that we ever get past it, Larry, because this stuff just doesn't seem like it wants to end, and it's very unfortunate.
It's very disappointing that in 2022 that we have to still talk about things like this. And again, it makes me think about how fortunate I was to grow up in Newcastle. It was a diverse community, and I think as a result, it made Larry Kelly a better person. I grew up with all kind of young men and women, and very diverse, and I feel very fortunate as an adult that I had that experience.
All right, that is all we have time for this week, everybody. That is Gridiron 22. That's a wrap. He's Larry Kelly. I'm Ron Poniewasz. We thank you, everybody, for joining us throughout the season here on Gridiron. And don't go too far, because next week we start basketball. The kings of the hardwood, the kings and queens of the hardwood, Larry, are back.
Something that I hope I know a little bit more about. But maybe not. It depends who you ask.
Yeah. Well, you've studied up. I think you've leaned on the right people. So, you did your due diligence there with football.
Yeah. Well, again, sports, coaching is coaching. It's everybody knows the X's and the O's, and I think the great coaches are the coaches that know how to get their kids ready to play and play hard and keep them motivated. And you know, I think those are the guys that have the most success.
That's right. So it's the coach's job to know the X's and the O's, and we're going to do our best to inform you about the Jimmies and the Joannes, so to speak.
Yes, absolutely. I might throw this in as a little prelude to our basketball coverage. The Shenango women, they beat Neshannock women over the weekend, and that's a feather in their cap because not many people, hardly anybody has beaten the Neshannock women in the last couple of years. So big win for the Shenango girls.
While we're throwing things in, I want to throw in real quick that Wednesday, December 14th, our winter sports guide appears in the daily paper. So you're going to want to run out and get that because it covers everything: boys basketball, girls basketball, wrestling. There's hockey. There's rosters. There's a couple days worth of schedules. Everything in there, 24 pages. So definitely mark that on the calendar. Wednesday, December 14th. Grab yourself a Newcastle News Daily print edition. He's Larry Kelly. I'm Ron Poniewasz. We thank you, everybody, for joining us for Gridiron. Good days are ahead for tip-off, everybody. We'll see you next week.
I became an attorney because I believe in hard work, fairness, and human decency. In a word, justice. My workers' compensation clients deserve justice because in an instant, their hard work turns into hard times when they get hurt on the job. No doubt, life is tough, but so am I. I've been fighting all my life, and I'll keep fighting for you. I'm Joe George, and here in Lawrence County, it's personal.